You're listening to a podcast of spurious morality. Hello and welcome to a podcast of Spurious Morality. I'm Johnstone, and with me this week I have Mansoor.
Hello.
And I have Connor.
Hello.
And we've been back with our second series for a good couple of months now, about 2.5 months, and we've not really talked that much about recent Big Finish releases, and we quite like those. So we thought we'd do an episode where we look back over the last sort of 2-3 months worth of stuff from Big Finish, pick out some of our favourites, and have a chat about them. So I'm going to start off by asking the pair of you what your favourite recent, like I say, last 2 or 3 months Big Finish release is. So do you want to go first, Mansoor?
I was looking back, and I think it's got to be the end of the Torchwood Among Us box sets for me out of the recent ones, and I think we talked about those recently on an episode. It's just a really strong series, and a nice conclusion.
Yeah, it was a proper exceptional run, and it's been about a month now, I think, since the last one came out, and I'm already kind of wanting to go back and redo the series and inevitably pick up on a million things that I missed the first time round. And yeah, it's very rare that a Big Finish set makes me want to go back and listen to it again this soon. So I will be revisiting it in the near future. What about you, Connor?
I think I would have to pick the Ninth Doctor adventures. I think they've sort of got into the swing of it where you can always depend on it being a very enjoyable set. And I always just love getting to spend a bit more time with my first Doctor. I'm still. It's never. I've said this before. I know we did a Ninth Doctor episode ages and ages ago, but it will never ever wear off that we have Christopher Eccleston back and playing the Ninth Doctor again, and I'm delighted that we're getting these regular sets with him. This one was a very, very strong example of the range.
Yeah, it was kind of the Ninth Doctor at his best. It was 3 really, really solid and enjoyable stories, and I thought it was a bit of a sort of odd, maybe brave decision to bring Alpha Centauri into the Ninth Doctor adventures, but they pulled it off. It was great. We'll talk about that a little bit more after. It is one of the releases that we have got lined up. I'm struggling to pick a favourite. I genuinely am. We've had some really good stuff this last couple of months, but I've kind of added this one to the running order quite late in the day, because I was just blown away by In the Night, which is the latest Fifth Doctor set. And I think the Fifth Doctor stuff at Big Finish has sort of been quietly very good for quite a while. You know, we had the Mark arc, which we've kind of discussed before. 40 was a lot of fun. It was sort of nice and nostalgic and very fan-pleasing. But this year we've had some sort of season 20 set adventures with Nyssa and Tegan, and they've all been very good. And we talked about the first set in our while we were away episode at the start of this series, and then In the Night came out and it was even better. A lot of fun, very sort of character focused, character driven, and it amazes me really that the character focused stuff still works really well with the Fifth Doctor, Nyssa and Tegan, who have been a team for 40 years now. So yeah, it's really good, really enjoyable. We'll move on though, and the first thing that we're going to talk about is the recent release is Purity Unbound, but as it kind of wraps up the whole Purity arc, it's kind of an opportunity to give some final thoughts on that. So that's the Sixth Doctor stuff that's been coming out last year and this year. 4 box sets making up a pretty solid storyline. So do you want to talk about those first, Mansoor? What are your thoughts on Purity Unbound and the Purity arc as a whole?
I enjoyed this arc, and I enjoyed this box set, and I think a few other people have said, and I fully agree with this. I just really appreciate the fact that that it's given this arc a bit of a definite end, because there are a few times over the years, quite a few times, when we've had like a companion rejoin or a new companion is introduced, and things are left a little bit up in the air with them, and we never come back to them, or it goes many years before we resolve a kind of soft cliffhanger. Um, but yeah, these last few box sets, I did miss Hebe in the set where she disappears, because as a character, I think she's great, and I hope we get maybe more with her further down the line. Um, and I thought this last box set had a nice bit of momentum to it. I felt like the middle one, while it was a decent story in its own right, that Broadway Belongs to Me, I found a little bit frustrating because it wasn't getting into the meat of resolving the cliffhanger about Hebe disappearing, and it was kind of a bit of a sidestep, side quest. And but I felt like with this third one, it kind of got into it more, and pushed things forward, and felt a bit more engaging because of that. Yeah, so overall, I'd really recommend it, and it's like when we talked about the Hex run, or those arcs that do have a nice beginning, middle, and end to them. It's something really good that you can pick up and revisit, that sort of tells a complete story, or recommend to someone else and say, like, oh, you should check out these 2 or 3 things, and it'll give you a sort of satisfying experience. So yeah, I would highly recommend people pick this up, and the two before it.
It's kind of a nice treat to have, like you say, that definitive end. It's something you can go back to and listen to as a unit. We have got these 4 box sets with 3 stories in each that we can now revisit and listen to as its own little era, and it's nice to have that era as opposed to just a smattering of adventures set at a certain point. It's been brilliant. What are your thoughts on it, Connor?
I have thought the arc as a whole has been fantastic, and I've really, really enjoyed listening to it over the last couple of years. I'm really looking forward, because it splits down nice and neatly into 2 series. I'm really looking forward to doing those 2 series as a run at some stage. Um, I have loved, certainly from, I think it was the second set, where they introduced Elise and Ron and Pura and Patricia. I've loved that sort of it's a slightly RTD style sort of family unit on planet Earth dynamic, and I've really, really loved that. That has been a major boon to my enjoyment of these stories, dropping back in on those characters and getting more of a regular supporting cast. I feel like they've been well built up, and it has paid to spend the time with them, as the series has done. I have again, I'll move on to this set in a moment, but I've really, really appreciated the Evelyn Smythe callbacks, because whenever I started really getting into Big Finish, I loved going back and hearing her stories, and I think it's fair to say for a lot of Big Finish fans that Evelyn Smythe is a major part of our enjoyment of the Sixth Doctor in particular. Pardon me, sorry. So I've loved getting to hear her again, and you do feel her presence very, very strongly at several points throughout this series. So that's been a major plus as well. This set has been a really good end. It's been a great end of the set, great end of the series rather. I love that we're sort of, you get to feel Purity wrecking time, as it happens. Like, you do get the feeling that this is going to be really, really difficult to undo, and you do get to feel the Doctor's desperation at what he has allowed Purity to do. So that has been superb. As I say there, I've enjoyed getting to spend the time, or I've enjoyed the multiple different timelines that Purity has created, and seeing, the different ways that she will run she wants to run planet Earth, and the way she wants to mold and shape it and sort of her own image, in the different ways, as she sort of deteriorates and becomes more desperate, so does the planet Earth, that she is controlling. So that was fantastic as well. Yeah, really great, satisfying end of the series, and I can't wait to do them all again as a series.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I'm very, very glad happened is, and big spoiler coming up. Hebe carries on. Hebe's still a companion. She doesn't stay behind. She doesn't go, right, I've had enough. And they even tease that. I love that little tease at the end of it. And then all of a sudden, nope, she's carrying on. Actually, she's going to keep journeying in the TARDIS. So hopefully we will revisit this TARDIS team in the future. And as much as I've loved the storyline, as much as I've loved having this arc that we can follow that is very, very personal to Hebe as a character. And, when Jacqueline Rayner joined us on this podcast, she explained how it was a very personal story to her as well. Absolutely loved all of that. But I think it'll be great to have some just normal adventures with Hebe again. We kind of got that in the first set, in Waterworlds. And yeah, I think moving forward, it'll be nice to just catch a bit of that. It'll be nice to just have the Sixth Doctor, Mel and Hebe having fun and travelling together. But obviously, there will be no complaints if they end up in another story arc as well, because this one's been so fantastic, and I just can't wait to hear more. I suspect it may be a little while before we do hear more, because we've got other Sixth Doctor companions and eras and that kind of thing that we also want to pay attention to. It'll be nice to catch up with Perry. It'd be nice to continue where Constance and Flip left off. But yeah, this has been a real sort of highlight of Big Finish's output for quite a long time, really. It's been incredibly good. So yeah, Purity Unbound has finished off a very excellent arc, in a really, really great way. So let's move on. And we're going to move on to what you, Connor, said was your favourite recent release. It's the Ninth Doctor Adventures Travel in Hope. So go ahead, talk to us about that set.
Yes, this has been a real highlight for me over the last wee while. Again, it's just coming down to, you have a set with three really solid stories. And I love, as I said, getting to spend a bit of time with the Ninth Doctor. As I've said before, it feels like spending some time with a dear old friend, who came back after a long period away, which is not very far off the truth, in all honesty. First two stories are great, but I think I'd single out the third as my favourite of the set, because when you put three elements, when you put the three elements of the Ninth Doctor, Alpha Centauri, and the Ice Warriors into a into an equation together, you might be forgiven for thinking that it's not going to work. It's going to, this is the time, this is it, they're going to jump the shark now. And it works really, really well. It's really fun to hear Christopher Eccleston's Doctor meeting Alpha Centauri in her earliest days, in the earliest days of their political career. And it's wonderful to hear Alpha again. It's wonderful to hear Alpha in a setting that doesn't involve Peladon as well. I'm delighted that we're getting a story that slightly breaks the Alpha Centauri formula. and we get to meet her in a different time period, and we get to see her in a different setting, and see a little bit more of the Galactic Federation. I would love for them to do more along those lines. It does go into sort of a takedown, I suppose you could say, or a railing against of Donald Trump and Donald Trump's type of politics. But it's fun to hear the Ninth Doctor and Alpha going up against that sort of villain. And there's a fun little moment with it's one of the ice spoilers for anyone who hasn't heard it, but there's one of the Ice Warriors is doing a little bit of a Batman standing in the shadows and disappearing act, and the Doctor actually does make a Batman reference. The music that accompanies it is one note different from the Michael Keaton Batman theme, which I adore and is one of my favourite bits of music ever. So that was a nice little Easter egg as well. But no, really enjoyed the set as a whole. Below there was great as well. I love that sort of yes, I really enjoy that sort of deep space remote station. We've got these workers who are really on the frontier. It has that sort of element. Feels a little bit like Vinder in Flux as well, sitting out in his little outpost station. It feels very similar to that actually, and I really like that. So yeah, enjoyed the set. Looking forward to hearing these ones again. I keep meaning to do a Ninth Doctor series. Like I keep meaning. I've never actually listened to series 1 or 2 the whole way through as a series, and I feel like I should do that as a little marathon at some stage soon.
I've had the like a playlist on the Big Finish app queued up since I think it was halfway through the second series. Going, right, that's it. I'm going to do every Ninth Doctor so far as like one marathon, and I just keep adding new sets to it, listening to them when they come out, but then adding new sets to this playlist, and I never quite get to it. So yeah, I must do the same. Mansoor, is there anything you want to add?
I would just say that my favourite of the 3 was Below There, the first one. I thought, I just thought it had that sort of creepier tone that I appreciated. I did like bits of the Alpha Centauri one, but for me it was the first episode and the second episode that felt they could have been TV episodes from his run. They just kind of captured the feel and tone of that era for me best. So yeah, those are my favourites of these.
It has kind of made me want, just going back to like the last episode, it's kind of made me want a sort of modern Peladon episode, a new series Peladon episode, actually on TV, thinking. Which I think we came fairly close to getting. I think it's something Mark Gatiss wanted to do during Capaldi's era, but I don't think it ever quite happened. And Empress of Mars is obviously fairly close. But yeah, I do kind of wish that we'd revisit Peladon on screen at some point, because I think actually they could do something fairly interesting and exciting with it.
There's a lot of potential. Do you think there would be something as obvious? It's a bit late for it now, maybe, but let's have something as obvious as doing like a Brexit analogy, given how like on the nose originally the Peladon stories were about.
Yeah, because they weren't subtle, were they? Really, either of them. And yeah, it'd be quite interesting to sort of continue that, or maybe if they were to handle it in a appropriately sensitive way, I guess. Perhaps obviously recently we've had the death of a monarch and a new king and that kind of thing. Maybe they could do something along those lines as well, something about royal ascension and all of that, and all the debates and arguments that come with it. But we're straying very far away from the Ninth Doctor here. But then it's something Big Finish could do. It isn't just something that would have to appear on screen. It's something that Big Finish could do, and Big Finish have revisited Peladon. We've had quite a few times, including in its very own Peladon box set. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought Travelling Hope was the strongest Ninth Doctor set in a while, actually. They've all been very good. I've enjoyed them all. But I think that we've got sort of three really quite different but fun stories here. And I quite like the direction that it's going now. I would perhaps like to see a few more two-parters in this range. We got one at the end of the first series, sort of the Cyberman two-parter. But I think maybe one or two more per series would be quite nice. But obviously that takes up a big chunk of a set. So yeah, it's something I'd like to see, but it's not a deal breaker. I'm going to keep buying it because as we keep going, as we keep saying, it's Christopher Eccleston doing Big Finish, and even though we're well into the third series of that now, there's still a kind of pinch me factor about it. Let's move on. The next set we want to talk about is one that I was particularly excited for. I really like the direction that this whole series is going at the moment, and it's doing something very interesting and very different, and it's kind of, in some ways, a kind of an Unbound range, I guess. But this is the Second Doctor Adventures, and obviously James Robert McCrimmon came out in late July. I thought it was really good. I really like the fact that we have teamed up this not exiled yet sort of alternative, slightly Second Doctor with an older Jamie. It gives a placing to the Annihilators that kind of tells us where that fits in, and it kind of puts them back together. And obviously, it gives another placing for two Doctors, although the Black Hole kind of did that as well. It doesn't matter. This is Doctor Who continuity, schmonty, schmuity. But I really did think that this was a fun set. I thought it was three fun stories. We do have a returning villain, but chronologically it's set before the Seeds of Doom, so it's a not returning yet villain. I don't know, but the Krynoids come back. Long story short, in quite a sort of exciting and interesting story. So, Mansoor, what did you think of the Second Doctor Adventures, James Robert McCrimmon?
I really liked this one, and I thought it was building on the previous Beyond War Games set, and I actually enjoyed it even more than that first one, because that first set, it was an intriguing concept, but then we get into what felt like sort of relatively, well, we've got Daleks and was it Ice Warriors in that first one? And those stories were fine, but I think this set had a sort of much more sort of creative hook at the start in terms of what's going on with older Jamie. And while it is nice to just sort of slip back into their previous dynamic, my hope for this team in future is that they do touch a bit more on what's changed for Jamie over that time, what it's like reuniting with the Doctor. Because use the fact that you've made the character older, that he's rejoining after all this time on Earth, to sort of tell slightly different types of stories. But yeah, the three stories in this set, I think, all work quite well. They capture, once Jamie rejoins the Doctor on his travels, they capture a lot of the previous dynamic that they have. They do get a line in, I think, about was it in this set or the previous one, about something being a big one, and it's an enjoyable set. And they do, to be fair, they do have things that make it feel fresh and unique. Like they carry on the arc of what's going on with the Doctor's CIA handler, and that culminates in quite a sort of satisfying way in the last story of the set.
Yeah, it's another set of adventures that has sort of a clear arc, and there's some real kind of forward-moving momentum to it, and I've enjoyed it. And my only complaint really is that we're only getting one set a year, whereas Doctors 3 onwards are getting at least 2. The Ninth Doctor, we're getting 4 sets.
I would like to see more from them because, and just on Michael Troughton's performance, I really enjoyed it. It didn't take me any time at all to just kind of go with it and accept him as the second Doctor. So, and I know opinions vary, and it can be quite a personal thing, like whether you take to a recast or not. But yeah, I thought he was great.
Yeah, I definitely hope that we can move towards more than one set of this per year going forward, because Michael Troughton's great, and I've always felt as though the second Doctor gets, and this isn't a Big Finish thing, this is kind of all over the place, the second Doctor seems to get the least attention for some reason. I've always theorised that it makes him, that it's because he's the hardest Doctor to write for, and maybe it makes writers kind of hesitate to go for him. I don't know, but
A lot of his performance was visual, I guess, on screen, like all the kind of like business and stuff he'd be doing while other people were talking. I don't know if that's part of it as well. That it's harder to capture that in an audio medium.
yeah, I think Patrick Troughton put a hell of a lot into the role. He was such a fantastic actor, but I'm very glad that we've got one of his sons playing the role and doing it very well. Doing a really, really, really good job. I listen to it and I very much believe I am listening to the second Doctor, and it's fantastic. Connor, what are your thoughts on James Robert McCrinn?
I thought it was a fantastic set. I really, really am enjoying the second Doctor adventures. Michael Troughton I think he's fantastic as the second Doctor. And he sort of falls into the same camp as Tim Treloar, where neither of them are doing slavish recreations of Patrick Troughton or John Pertwee's voices. They both sound very close, but they don't sound identical. But the performances they give are absolutely convincing. They've both captured the essences of their Doctors. And I am fully convinced by both of them. And Troughton in particular, I think, has captured the mannerisms and cadences, I suppose you could say. Just again, it's the essence of the second Doctor, and he plays him fantastically. I really love listening to him, and I would love to hear a lot more of him. The set is fantastic. I've enjoyed the second set, or the second story in particular. It's sort of a Doctor Who take on Rear Window, which is very, very cool to sit and listen to. And I like that you're spending long stretches of time with the Doctor looking out, the window. I think it feels very deliberately like a Doctor Who take on Rear Window, which has only just occurred to me actually while we're sitting here. But that's I'm going to run with that. It's fun that you get the Crinoid reveal. I love that thing of Doctor Who's meeting villains that they encounter in later lives on the TV series. You get something similar with the Sontarans and the First Doctor in the early adventures. There's a third Doctor one as well, but I can't remember what it was. The Vardens, yes, I love that, where you're getting, villains and aliens that appear later in the chronology on the TV series, but we get these little prequels with them, so that's quite fun. Yeah, really strong set, and I'm looking forward. I like that we again have that sort of narrative thrust, that it is doing its own thing. It's not fitting in among other stories in the second Doctor's era. I like that we're getting to push forward into new territory. I love Raven's presence. Think she's a great character. And I would love to hear. I'm really enjoying this sort of Time Lord Black Ops sort of situation that's going on around her. So big fan of this series, and I can't wait to hear next year's. I would love if they would up them into 2 or 3 sets a year, because it absolutely deserves it.
It is exciting that it's open ended as well. That in most cases, when Big Finish do stories, they're slotting into gaps in established continuity, but we have no idea what happens to this Doctor, to this version of the second Doctor. So, yeah, that's kind of exciting as well.
Yeah, it definitely helps to sort of bring that element of the unknown into it. Gives it a wee bit more, raises the stakes a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
the only thing I wasn't too keen on in this was whenever Jamie rejoins. We jump from the first story to the second, and they sort of do this info dump, I suppose, where they say, "Oh, we've had all these stories and we're best friends again now." Would have been very cool to hear the second Doctor and Jamie trying to reconnect, and play that out a little bit more slowly, and have their, you know, Jamie probably, I imagine, would be quite unsure of the second Doctor, because he doesn't fully remember. The Time Lords had wiped his memories. I
Yeah.
think that would have been an interesting dynamic between the two of them. But it's very fun to hear Fraser Hines again. I've missed him over the last little while. In any case,
I do sort of wonder if the that sort of time jump that happened was kind of because we're only getting one set a year. And actually, I think it would have been nice to have had just a set of exactly what you said there, sort of the Doctor and Jamie re-establishing their relationship and having to rebuild some of the trust that maybe's lost. And then we go into what was the two latter stories in this set.
And how's Jamie? How's he changed? Because like he'd be a different person. He's lost most of the memories of his travels with the Doctor, and he's lived a life on Earth. So yeah, I just wanted a bit of yeah. It'd be nice if they went back and filled that in sometime to just show it, like acknowledge that, and show how he's maybe a slightly different person.
Yeah, there's always room to revisit it, I guess. And, we've got Annihilators, which is kind of from that era. We'll move on, and it's to the last thing, really, that I wanted to discuss. And I'm just going to cover it very quickly because I know that Connor's not listened to it yet, so I'm going to stay spoiler free. But as I said at the start, I've really, really, really enjoyed the Fifth Doctor stuff that we've got this year. But this latest set in the night, it really was something special. Two great stories, Pursuit of the Nightjar and Resistor, very different stories as well. The first one, Pursuit of the Nightjar, it's 4 parts and it takes its time to just tell this really fantastic character story. Like outside of the regulars, there are 2 other characters in this, and one of them doesn't have that big a role. So yeah, it's sort of a really, really character driven, interesting story. And I think it's probably a story that you could only really do with the Fifth Doctor. And I love that when that happens and we get a story that's just so tied to its Doctor, or so unique that only that Doctor would work. You couldn't imagine it with any other. And that's what we've got here. And then you've got Resistor, which is it's a story set in 1982, and it's very much the sort of thing that they wouldn't have made in 1982, but it's obviously it's the correct era for Tegan, and it's quite interesting to visit that. So it's definitely a set worth picking up. Like I say, it's a late addition to this episode. I heard it a week ago and decided, I need to talk about it. It's just so good. Probably go into more detail in the future when I'm on here with somebody else who's heard it, and so I don't have to hide half the facts about it in sort of real life spoiler tags, I suppose. But yeah, really good release, really worth listening to, and just keep doing what you're doing with the Fifth Doctor Big Finish because it's really good. There is no big overarching story, and we do like those. We've talked about how they've worked with the Sixth and Second Doctors, but actually these nice standalone season 20 set stories, they're really really working as well.
I feel like the Fifth Doctor has always sort of flown not under the radar as such, but when the Fifth Doctor stories at Big Finish hit, they really, really hit.
Yeah.
And I really love hearing, so many favourites in there. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, you've got that box set with Psychodrome and Iterations of I, Fanfare for the Common Men. I'm actually lined up to listen to The Elite over the next few days, and it's one of the best lost stories they ever did. It's one of the best stories for the particular villain in that story as well, which I won't spoil for anyone who hasn't heard it. It does become obvious as you listen, but there's a bit of a reveal moment in there which is incredible. You've got stuff like the Peterloo Massacre, and it's very difficult for me to think of Fifth Doctor stories that don't hit hard because there is such a high hit rate there.
I think if you did a top 100 of Big Finish, she'd feature quite heavily. Like, there's obviously like Spare Parts, Winter as well is like that one episode that's part of this first anthology. Um, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in this run. I fully agree.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think it's easier to forget the Fifth Doctor because it hasn't had any years-long arcs like the Seventh Doctor and the Sixth Doctor and the
Yeah,
Eighth Doctor all have. Um, going through the monthly adventures. I know we had the Mark arc towards the end, but it was only sort of 2.5 trilogies in the end. It wasn't huge.
we had older Nissa, but like that was one of my gripes about returning companions, where they de-age her, and then it's sort of then my question becomes like, well, why bring the character back when she's older if you're gonna just reset her to where she was when she was younger? But yeah, the Mark arc was pretty good though.
Yes. Yeah. He's definitely had his good arcs, but it doesn't feel like when you consider the Seventh Doctor, when you had the arc that
Heath
kind of
and
concluded with
yeah,
the Hex arc, basically.
yeah.
I mean, concluded about 3 times. Gods and Monsters and Afterlife and Signs and Wonders. But that was huge, and it genuinely did carry through for years and years and years. And all of the Evelyn stuff with the Sixth Doctor was significant to it as well, although that can be listened to as its own sort of arc as well, really. And yeah, the Fifth Doctor, it never felt as though we got something as sort of huge and expansive as that. And I think it would be nice to have something like that. But as I say, at the same time, I'm really enjoying this sort of standalone mid-era stuff that we're getting at the moment. And I'm sure we're going to revisit Adric. I'm sure we're going to revisit Turlo. And I like to think the Fifth Doctor and Perry will get more Big Finish time at some point, but obviously it's not happened for quite a while now. I think maybe that's one thing we won't see, but yeah, it'll just be interesting to see if anything like that does pop up. But yeah, just keep doing what you're doing with the Fifth Doctor because it is working, and there are some sort of very low key gems there, I guess. Well, before we go, I'm just going to very quickly ask if there's any other recent releases that have kind of caught your attention and you've enjoyed. So, do you want to go first, Mansoor?
The only thing that's coming to mind is the Torchwood releases, which I really enjoyed. I've got a lot of stuff lined up to listen when I get the time. Like, I've heard good things about the Lost Seventh Doctor box set, and that's encouraged me because I felt like things lost momentum a bit when he came out of his big arc, and it sounds like there's been possibly a bit of a return to form with these latest ones. So yeah, looking forward to hearing those.
Yeah, absolutely. The latest set in particular is really quite good, actually. Quite definitely worth getting hold of. Connor, what about you?
We have actually talked about all my recent listening here. I've had a bit of a Big Finish light couple of months, so I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask and say that I'm very, very excited for some of next month's releases, particularly Third Doctor Adventures Intelligence for War, because it's an Eddie Robson story, and I feel like we haven't had an Eddie Robson story for ages. And I re-listened recently to the Unsal incursion and really, really loved that. So I'm looking forward to getting back into season 7. We also have next month's Once and Future, Time Lord and Memorial with David Warner and Christopher Eccleston, which I'm incredibly excited to hear, and I'm very much looking forward to talking about. I really love that picture they released of the two of them together at the recording. I'm delighted they got to record together on the same day in the studio. And it's one of the best cast photos Big Finish I think have ever released.
Yeah, that image, just the two of them at the recording, was enough to make me go, "Oh my goodness, this is going to be such a good release! I cannot wait for this." It's two incredible actors, and it's very likely this is the last we'll hear from David Warner. I think at Big Finish. But yeah, it's it's going to be something special, I think. I'm with you about the third Doctor as well, Intelligence for War. I love season 7. I can't get enough of season 7, and I'm really glad we're getting another big season 7 parter. And like you say, Eddie Robson is a name that definitely rings the excitement bells when you see it announced. So yeah, roll on those. Another thing that I've listened to very recently, actually. So I'd never heard the original Luther Arkwright, and then obviously they announced the new one. So I bought the first one, and then they announced that the new one was coming out a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, all right, I better listen to the first one then. So I actually ended up listening to the first one, having about a 2-day gap, and then listening to the second one. Absolutely brilliant, really, really worth listening to. It's so different and bizarre, and David Tennant is absolutely brilliant. I mean, the whole cast is absolutely brilliant. Fans of sort of Paul Darrow in full overacting mode, that first set is definitely for you. But yeah, so the Luther Arkwright, another sort of Big Finish gem that I guess probably hasn't had as much attention as it deserves until now. And obviously, when they did the first one, David Tennant wasn't the megastar he is now. He wasn't even the Doctor. So yeah, getting another one, I can only imagine how exciting it was, sort of after an 18-year gap. But I've enjoyed listening to the two of them close together. Okay then, well that is all we have time for. It's been really good to just sort of go through what we've been listening to recently. We will do more episodes like this in the future, obviously. As Connor's pointed out, we've got a lot to be excited about over the next month. But for now, I will say thank you and goodbye to Mansoor.
Thanks, it's been fun.
And I'll say goodbye to Connor.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be back for more podcasting very soon. Goodbye now.